Have you ever heard of a church so terrifying that even priests refuse to speak its name? A place where no mass has been held in over 2 centuries, yet candles sometimes light themselves? What if I told you this church was once part of the Roman Catholic system, until it was quietly erased from Vatican maps? Why was it abandoned overnight in 1789? And why does every attempt to demolish it end in tragedy? No one dares to go near it after dark. The locals won't even face its doors. And those who enter often don't return the same, if at all. Some say it's cursed. Others whisper of something far worse, something that was sealed beneath the altar long before the church was ever built. And just recently, for the first time in decades, someone went inside with a camera. What he captured was never supposed to reach the public. Until now. This is the story of the world's most haunted Catholic church, a forgotten relic of faith, fear, and something that should never have been disturbed. You're about to see what the Vatican never wanted anyone to find. Before we reveal the evidence hidden for centuries, before we show you the moment everything changed, make sure you're subscribed. Turn on notifications, because what's buried inside this place may change everything you think you know about the church and what lies beneath it. The place we're talking about is real. It exists. You can find it on the map if you know where to look. Tucked away in the remote village of Lakova in the Czech Republic stands a structure now known across Europe by a single name, the Ghost Church. But that's not what it was always called. Originally dedicated to St. George, it was built in the 14th century, centuries before electricity, before modern medicine, before the Reformation. It was meant to be a sanctuary of hope, and became anything but. This small parish witnessed horrors that would shake even the most devout. Waves of plague swept through its doors, over and over, leaving behind rows of the dead. In the 30 Years' War, it was desecrated by invading forces who reportedly performed black rites within the very altar. Later, in the 1800s, the church was struck by lightning, twice. The roof caught fire. The walls cracked. Yet still it stood. But then, something happened in 1968 that the villagers still refused to explain. During a funeral service, with mourners gathered and the priest midway through a prayer, the ceiling collapsed. There were no strong winds, no storm. No engineering report could explain why it gave way at that precise moment. That was the last time a mass was ever held inside. Since that day, the church was sealed, forgotten, but not silent. Locals began reporting strange sounds. Chanting, footsteps in the gravel, the smell of incense coming from inside at night when no one was there. They say you can sometimes hear children crying, even though no children live nearby. And when a few brave souls tried to spend the night inside, they left before sunrise, some weeping, some not speaking. One man never spoke again. Today, the Church of St. George is known as the Ghost Church, and not just for the name. Inside, life-sized hooded figures sit silently in the pews. Their identities? Unknown. Their presence? Unnerving. Originally placed as an art installation by a Czech sculptor, the figures are said to have moved positions overnight, without explanation. Even the artist himself claims he never carved more than 13. Now, there are 15. The stories surrounding the Church of St. George are not just legends. They're documented, witnessed, and in some cases recorded. Locals have kept quiet for years, out of fear, superstition, or perhaps respect for something older than the church itself. But visitors, tourists, skeptics, they don't stay quiet for long. There are dozens of reports, each eerily similar. Tourists fainting within moments of stepping inside. Children screaming uncontrollably, pointing toward the pulpit, shouting, "She's staring at me." One child was said to speak in fluent Latin for nearly 3 minutes, before collapsing. He'd never studied Latin. I felt something watching me, but I was completely alone. Then there are the sounds. Whispers behind the altar, rustling robes when no one's moving. And the organ. It's broken, keys rotted, pedals jammed. Yet multiple visitors claim they've heard it play, sometimes softly, other times loud enough to shake the rafters. And then, there are the apparitions. Some describe hooded monks kneeling silently at the altar. Others have seen faceless nuns lining the back pews, their veils still, as if in mourning. And always, there's mention of the woman in white. I turned around, and the pews were filled with figures in robes. But they weren't facing the altar. They were facing me. She appears only in glimpses. A pale woman, eyes missing from her face, standing near the pulpit or hovering above the crypt door. Some say she's protecting something. Others, that she is what must be protected against. And it's not just what people see. It's what they feel. A presence that presses on your chest. A pressure in your ears. The sense that someone or something is just inches behind you, breathing, waiting. One traveler left shaking, muttering a phrase over and over. The statues weren't there when I came in, now they're everywhere. And maybe the most unsettling detail? The security camera installed in 2019. It records 1 hour per night, then shuts off due to power failure. Always at the same time, 3:03 a.m. They say every haunting has a source, something buried, something broken, something unfinished. And in the case of the Church of St. George, the whispers always lead beneath the altar. According to village lore, long before the statues, before the collapse, before even the wars, there was a priest. A man who served this church faithfully for over 30 years. And one autumn evening during Mass, something happened. Witnesses say he paused mid-sermon, clutched the pulpit, and began to weep. He collapsed before the final blessing. His last words were in Latin, non dimittetur. He will not be released. He died right there, but the body was never buried. For reasons unknown, the church elders refused to remove him from the sanctuary. Some say they feared moving him would wake something. Others believed he had absorbed some dark presence, something he'd accidentally called into the church during years of solitude, prayer, and, according to some, experiments in ancient rites. When the altar was repaired in 1790, a local builder confessed to sealing a hollow space beneath it, under strict orders. He never spoke publicly again, but the rumors didn't stop. It became common belief that the priest's body still lies underneath, unblessed, unrest, entombed in silence. And that whatever he died trying to contain never left. Whatever is haunting this place may not be from hell, but something far older. Years later, an unverified letter began circulating among scholars of forbidden Vatican history. Its header was unmistakable, papal seal, Latin signature, but most of the content was redacted. The one legible line read, "No exorcism is to be performed at the Church of St. George under any circumstance." And just below that, handwritten in red ink, "It is not ours to cast out what was never summoned." Another document, sourced from a Czech archive and dated 1921, mentions a bishop who attempted to bring in 3 ordained exorcists. 2 never arrived. The third disappeared the night before. To this day, no official rite has ever been performed inside the church. No blessing, no cleansing, only silence. And whatever waits below the altar stones. In recent years, despite local warnings and the church's reputation, the Church of St. George has drawn a different kind of visitor. Those who claim they aren't afraid of the dark, but are determined to understand it. Paranormal investigators, skeptical scientists, late-night thrill seekers with gear in hand and questions they thought they were ready to answer. One of the earliest investigations on record came in 2013, when a Czech paranormal team entered the church with thermal cameras and EMF detectors. Their footage has never been released in full, only fragments remain. But what we've seen is enough to unsettle even the most hardened skeptics. They captured multiple heat signatures where there should have been none. At 3:17 a.m., one thermal camera locked onto a cold shape, human-sized, kneeling at the altar. The figure held its position for over 5 minutes before vanishing, without a trace of movement. Simultaneously, their EMF meter surged to levels typically associated with electromagnetic fields near high-voltage lines. But there were no power sources nearby, no machinery, no phones, just stone, air, and silence. And then came the voice, captured on 3 separate recorders, one placed on the pulpit, another on the altar, and the third near the entrance. The exact same whisper at the exact same time. A male voice, raspy, almost mechanical, speaking fluent Latin. Ego sum finum. I am the end. The investigators fled the building shortly after. 2 refused to speak about the experience publicly. One later told a reporter off record, "It was like something knew our names. Not just that we were there, but who we were, what we feared." Still, not everyone agrees. A A small group of skeptics, including European historians and paranormal debunkers, argue the church's reputation has grown from exaggeration, superstition, and the power of suggestion. They believe the statues create a psychological illusion, playing tricks on the mind, distorting perceptions in the dim light and acoustics. But even they can't explain why fully charged batteries drain instantly inside the building, or why metal equipment corrodes weeks after exposure, despite being indoors, or why, during one investigation, the only footage that failed to record was the hour between 3 o'clock and 4 a.m., even though the camera logs confirm it was running. And then, there are those who have no doubt. Priests, psychics, paranormal researchers. They believe something ancient rests beneath the altar. Not a ghost, not a demon, but a presence that predates both. Something unbound by heaven or hell. Something that speaks only when it chooses, and waits, silently, for those foolish enough to try and listen. In an age where nearly everyone carries a camera in their pocket, the line between myth and proof has begun to blur. And while many believe that the Church of St. George is just an eerie relic from a distant past, recent footage says otherwise. Footage that has gone viral for all the wrong reasons. One of the earliest viral clips appeared on TikTok. A traveler from Prague entered the church during daylight hours. He pans across the pews, narrating casually, laughing even. But halfway through the clip, the candle near the pulpit suddenly flares, then extinguishes. There's no breeze, no draft. The windows are sealed shut. The moment is subtle, but unmistakable. The flame dances, like something exhaled on it. The clip exploded overnight. For 0.7 million views in less than 24 hours. The comments were flooded. Did anyone else see that shadow at the back? Rewatch at 042, the statue moves. Another video, filmed by a pair of urban explorers and uploaded to YouTube Shorts, showed the interior in night vision. The camera glides slowly past the shrouded figures, hooded, faceless, unmoving. But just as the frame shifts left, something behind the last row seems to lean forward, only slightly. The statue closest to the aisle has its head turned. When they pan back, seconds later, it's facing forward again. The clip ends with the words, "We left right after." The air was heavy, like breathing water. Still others caught strange reflections in the windows, silhouettes of people who weren't there. A young woman live-streamed from the church, laughing nervously. Behind her, in the far corner of the screen, something white moved, smoothly, like fabric gliding across stone. She didn't notice until the replay. Her comments lit up with horror. "Who's behind you? Run." And then there's the most unsettling footage of all. A short, 12-second reel from a Spanish tourist who walked through the church alone. At the start, he shows the statues, still covered in white sheets. By the time he reaches the altar and turns to film the pews again, one of the sheets is on the floor, completely removed. The statue underneath is gone. He didn't hear a thing, didn't feel anything, just silence, emptiness, and one less figure. He ran, never returned. He's deleted his account, but the clip survives, downloaded, shared, reposted thousands of times across the internet. These clips have never been debunked, even by skeptics. No evidence of editing, no loops, no visual effects, just raw, eerie moments captured by ordinary people who came for curiosity and left with something else. Something that followed them, or worse, stayed behind, watching the next visitor walk through the same door. Even after centuries of silence, broken rituals, and unspeakable sightings, one question continues to haunt everyone who visits the Church of St. George. Why? Why this place? Why does this church, above all others, seem to breathe, seem to pull at the edges of reason? Why does it refuse to die, and yet will not live? Some believe the ground it was built on was never meant for worship. That before the first stones were laid in the 14th century, this land already held something ancient, something primal. There are whispers in Lakovu's oldest oral histories of pagan sacrifices, of a well that once stood where the altar now rests. A place of offerings, and something waiting to receive them. Others think it's punishment. That something happened within those walls long ago, something so dark, so deeply offensive to heaven, that even time cannot cover it. That the cries, the shadows, the silence, are not ghosts. They are echoes of judgment. Still others believe it is a portal. a thin place between this world and another. A place where unfinished souls drift in and out, lost in repetition, crying out not for freedom, but recognition. To be known, to be seen. And yet, no one has ever managed to stay through the night. Not one. Investigators, thrill seekers, monks, mystics, all have tried. Some made it to 3:00 a.m. A few claimed they would stay till dawn, but every single one left before sunrise. One man had to be carried out, his lips blue, his eyes unblinking. He never spoke again. Another had claw marks down his back, but no torn clothing. And one priest, who attempted a private mass inside the sanctuary, collapsed just after opening the missal. The pages turn on their own. The most baffling mystery? The church itself refuses to be restored. Every attempt to renovate it fails. Scaffolding collapses. Roof tiles shatter before they're installed. One architect even claimed the measurements change slightly, only at night. Doors swell shut. Foundations shift. Locals say it's a warning, that to restore the church is to reawaken what sleeps beneath it. That something sealed under that altar does not want light. It wants memory. It wants to be remembered, feared, honored, or fed. And so, the pews remain dusty. The candles remain broken. The statues remain silent. But their heads sometimes turn. The whispers return like clockwork. The air grows thick by 3 a.m. And those brave, or foolish, enough to walk through its doors always return changed. If they return at all, is this church simply cursed? Or are the souls crying for justice? The Church of St. George may be isolated in the Czech countryside, but its story echoes across continents. Because this isn't just about one haunted church. This is about the uneasy space between faith and fear, between what we can explain and what we choose not to. There's no denying the church's timeline is real. The historical record shows its construction in the 14th century, its abandonment in 1968, the desecrations during war, the plague, the priest who collapsed during Mass. All documented, all true. But what about the rest? The cold spots, the statues that move, the faceless woman in white? Is it just myth, born from centuries of isolation and superstition? Or is it a warning echoing through stone and shadow, begging us not to forget? The truth likely sits somewhere in between, where sacred architecture meets human memory, where belief shapes experience, and fear becomes faith's reflection in the dark. The Catholic Church has remained silent. No formal statement, no investigation, no exorcism ever approved. Is the silence intentional, or is it caution? Could it be that the Church, above all institutions, knows exactly what this place is, and understands it must remain untouched? Because maybe, just maybe, this isn't about ghosts. Not really. Maybe it's about what happens when we forget the sacred, when we allow the holy to rot, when altars crack and prayers fade, when silence replaces sacrament, and something else answers. The story of St. George's is not finished, because somewhere right now, another traveler is preparing to enter its doors, to walk between those lifeless statues, to breathe the cold, unmoving air, to test the boundary between the seen and the unseen. They might go looking for proof, for a thrill, for answers, but they may find something else, a truth that can't be recorded, a legend that doesn't fade with the sunrise, or a presence that's been waiting in the pews all along. And if you ever visit, look to the altar before you leave, because if the statue in the third pew is gone, you were never alone. So now I ask you, would you walk through that doorway? Would you sit in one of those pews, knowing others saw them filled with figures who weren't alive? Would you stand before the altar and listen closely for whispers that don't belong to this world? Or do you believe some doors should never be opened? Tell me in the comments. I read every one of them. And if you live for stories like this, true, unsettling, and impossible to forget, hit like, tap subscribe, and turn on that bell so you don't miss what's coming next. Because this channel is where forgotten places are remembered, and where silence is never empty. Until next time, stay curious and stay cautious.